Hi, Dallisa.
It's thinking about it.
Uh,
Oh my God.
Anyway,
Bob, the Mercury retrograde from hell. We are here and we are recording and it is working.
isn't that nice? I always wanted to do something that was really, really hard, and astrology kind of fits the bill.
Oh my gosh. So those of you that are new to my channel or new to Bob, if you've never heard of Bob Mulligan, me, Dallisa Hocking, hello, welcome. But Bob is literally an astrology legend. So Bob, I have to ask you, because I'm going to put all the details about you in the description of the video so people can read about you, find out about your work. But I have to ask you, you've been doing this a really, really long time. How would you quickly summarize your career? Or is there a point of your career that when you think about your work as an astrologer that you think is like a highlight or a pinnacle?
Well, I think of my best work in astrology is still in front of me. Although I have just celebrated 50 years in the field. Uh, I will, I would tell you that the first time I went to see an astrologer, Swami Kriyananda, who became one of my first astrology teachers later on, told me many things that were accurate about my personality and things that had happened in my life and were gonna happen in my life. And he told me that I would become a professional astrologer. And I thought, well, he's really wrong on that because I had no inclination to become an I didn't even know how many signs of the zodiac there were. I had no hobby interest in it. But that, it became true within a couple of years. But what was important in that first session to me was he said, you know, one of your coworkers is talking behind your back and is creating a lot of trouble. And you will find out about it and you'll get very angry. And when you get angry, you'll get fired. So what I'm telling you to do is to not get angry, to just be chilled out. And when your boss asks you about this, just be flat. Just tell the truth, but don't react to anything. And if you do that, the person who is attacking you will be fired. And I tell you, Delise, that is exactly what happened. And when I entered the field of astrology as an astrologer, I realized, okay, astrology has great descriptive properties. But what was important to me was how it could write you a prescription for how to live your life or things to do. And in the arena of mundane astrology, meaning I publish a newsletter that comes out every month that has, what's going on in the world and what you should do about this and that. But I aim at telling people what they can do about what's happening because so often people get depressed and they feel that they're powerless, that they have no energy, there's nothing that they can do to make their life better. So if an asteroid falls on your head, well, okay, there wasn't anything probably that you could do to prevent that, although a good astrologer would probably tell you to not go outside on that day. But my point is that if you use astrology correctly, there is always something that you can do inwardly or outwardly to make things better and to get you closer to the goal of your life, to your mission, to what you're supposed to be creating. So that was how I got into the field. Now, tonight, what I wanted to talk about,
Then you got a lot to talk about because we
well,
were doing a little pre-show trying to get Mercury retrograde to assist us with getting the technology working.
Well, we're doing this talk under a Mercury retrograde. But Mercury is trying to Jupiter now. Jupiter is the higher mind. Mercury is, how we process information, communicate, travel, and so on. And the trine between the two gives us an avenue into the truth. Now, it is true that both Jupiter and Mercury right now, at the moment that we're speaking, they're both retrograde, which moves against the grain for being able to publish something, get something out, get, a talk on the internet. But hey, what the heck? You and I are troopers. We're big people. We're pushing against the tide here.
I think
I
that's pretty typical for you and I, though, just as individual people, is like, why not just do the opposite of what everyone's expecting?
Well, there was a businessman that wrote uh, a book called The Contrarian Investor. And he made a lot of money on Wall Street, and he did his book was fabulous. But my point is that he had a casual interest in astrology, and he would find all of the board members' sun signs and give them tasks that match their sun signs. And he found, if a person was an Aries, he had to make them a leader of something in order to get their best effort out, and so on. But my point is that when I was looking at what we wanted to talk about tonight, of course, I read other people's newsletters. I write one, and I like to read other people's, and I'd like to not just read books and articles and stuff, but I get the videos online like everybody else, and so I tuned into, well, what's everybody else talking about? And lots of astrologers talking about, the age of Aquarius, the dawning of the age of Aquarius and stuff. And it got me to thinking, I really, people, didn't feel that people had done a good job of taking the whole idea of the age of Aquarius apart. So I thought a little preliminary here on what that's about would be something that people might find useful, because it's in the air. Well, there's been a lot of ink spilled on the whole idea of what the age of Aquarius means. And the idea behind it is that there is something called the precession of the equinox, where the 0 point of Aries, 0 point of Aries is the vernal equinox point, where the plane of the ecliptic, the Earth's path around the sun, is a cut on the first day of spring at the 0 degrees of Aries point. Well, how is that vernal point determined to be Aries? And if you go back, the Babylonians had around 7th century BC had determined that vernal equinox point, where the sun crosses the ecliptic going north, and from that point on, the equal hours of daylight and darkness, from that point on, the days will be getting longer. Uh, that point was focused on the very first star in the constellation of Aries. The constellations are all different sizes and shapes, and they lie along the pattern of the ecliptic, but they're star patterns and they're different sizes. But the signs of the zodiac are exactly 30 degrees each. Now, before people get too lost in the weeds on this, it's important to remember that although I'm a Western astrologer, I use the tropical zodiac, the Vedic astrologers or the Indian astrologers use the star-based constellation, that what's called the sidereal zodiac. However, they also use signs of the zodiac that are 30 degrees. They just started with the beginning of this constellation Aries. This is kind of important because the precession of the equinox is that this 0 degrees Aries point keeps moving back at about 1 degree every 72 years. And it takes 26,000 years for it to go all the way around to come back to its starting point. That is one epoch. And this is a very important cycle for people who think in terms of the big picture. For us, the meaning is that 0 degrees Aries point has now retrograde all the way through, the sign of Pisces back to the beginning of Aquarius. Now, people can kind of scratch their heads and say, well, it didn't, that didn't hit the constellation Aquarius, which is true. That's not going to happen for another 600 years. But if you look at the beginning of the zodiac, going back to how it was set up by the Babylonians, and the research that I've done shows that you can either put it all the way back to 7th century before Christ, or to 130 degrees BC. You can choose one of them. But even if you chose the latter date of 130 degrees BC, guess what? When you split the zodiac up into 12 sections in that 26,000 year cycle, we would be entering the age of Aquarius in the year 2036. So to me, and if you take, of course, 700 years earlier than that, we'd be well into it. But you think of it, my grandmother was born in 1881, didn't have electricity, plumbing, there were no cars, there were no internet, there were no telephones, there were no telegraphs. I mean, we had none of the things that the modern society is built on. You have a cell phone, I have a cell phone, you and I are separated by huge differences. We're talking, we travel, we go huge distances. All of that is the modern world. This is Aquarius stuff. Now, I just one point, there's always things that point to the beginning of an age. And you go back to the, 509 BC, which was the beginning of the Roman Republic. Well, in the Roman Republic, even before we got, to the empire, to the dictators, and the Caesars and so, even when there was some degree, a modicum of the Senate having power, they had gladiators. I found this fascinating. You know what the most popular, one-on-one gladiator sport was? They'd fill up the Colosseum. They had one gladiator with a short sword and a shield, and one gladiator with a trident and a net, and they fought each other. One is clearly a symbol of Aries, and the other is clearly a symbol of Pisces. And this was when the vernal equinox was retrograding back into Pisces. And, now we've come out the other end. What was the age of Pisces about? Well, it was 300 years into after 350 years after Christ, that Catholicism became the, state religion of the Roman Empire. But we had this burgeoning sense for a long period of time before that of faith being extremely important, and people learning to have a belief in something that they couldn't see, they couldn't perceive through their senses. It didn't put money in their pocket or give them prestige per se, but they did give them a sense of continuity and connectedness with their community and with the civilization. Now, what happens on the other side is that starts to break down. You know, you'd have to, you go to any country in the Western world, on Sunday morning, there's not so many people in church anymore. The traditional ecclesiastical structures of all the world religions are broken down. You think of Buddhism as being very peaceful, but look what happens in Myanmar. It's like it's a Buddhist country, and they try to exterminate the followers of the Prophet Muhammad. It's like, and you think of Hinduism as being a very accepting religion, and now you have sort of this, Ravindra Modi wanting to make India a completely Hindu state, and making it marginal for anybody else. So I'm saying that the world is suffering, and there's a reason astrologically that points to this. We have reached the end of an age. It's the end of a cycle of cycles. Now, we have a lot of ink being spilled over the idea of the conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn on the 21st of December, 2020, as being at 0 Aquarius, start of Aquarius, and a lot of astrologers have commented on the fact, hey, when Pluto goes in to Aquarius, it's at 0 degrees. It's right on that point. Well, this is important for this year, because we have 3 planets beyond the orbit of Saturn. Again, remember, Saturn is the skin of our solar system. Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto are the aura. They're the higher energies. They're transcendental. They're beyond finite time and space. Now, they also manifest in time and space, but they do so with great trepidation unless they're harnessed by the planets Jupiter and Saturn, which are in the hierarchy of the planets, which is another talk that I just gave recently, are they're the socializing planets. Well, Jupiter is how you are socialized in your family. Jupiter is in its exaltation in Cancer, the sign of the family. And Saturn is how you are socialized to the planet, to the larger society. And Saturn is in its exaltation in Libra, which is the sign of justice. It's a scale. I may love you, but if you broke the law, you go to jail. It is the symbol of equality. Everybody should be equal before the law. The Saturn mantra. These 2 great deities harness these transcendental planets. Now, why this is important in 2024 is, well, Pluto's already, it's in 23, already dipped his toe into the water of Aquarius. He's already been there and waking us up, reminding us. Pluto is infinite power. When Pluto was discovered, it was when fascists, the Nazis in Germany and Mussolini in Italy were coming to power. There's this tremendous focus on, you have to be strong. And it's like Donald Trump just saying a few days ago, these immigrants are polluting the blood of America. Oh yeah, well, Hitler said that too about the Jews. It's like it's Pluto unharnessed is a great difficulty. And so entering into Aquarius, what does Pluto entering Aquarius mean that we can see symbolically? Well, hello, it's chat PDT. It's like this artificial intelligence that it is running rampant. with no guardrails. Again, I'm not anti-technology and I'm not anti artificial intelligence. I'm just saying it's like this is a symbol of what happens when the tail is wagging the dog. It's like when we are moving into waters without the guardrails. Now, Neptune and Uranus will also be changing signs. So when I spoke in another talk about the sextile fan between Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, which are sort of creating the grid work for the change of culture that's happening in the, 2025, 26, 27, 28, 29. They're all supporting each other and they're pushing the envelope of what it is that we can create. And all three, and again, this is not unique, that three of them have been in some kind of fan, sextile fan, on and off, for 30 years or so. But this is the first time where they're all three within a short period of time changing signs and moving into signs that are extremely positive. Positive doesn't mean yippee. It means positive in the sense that they're pushing towards something futuristic, something that we can look at and say, yes, this is something that we can get behind and innovate with. Neptune going into Pisces, leaving Pisces and going into Aries is a very big deal because Aries is ruled by Mars, and Mars and Neptune are the planets of devotion. And when they function together, we're inspired to make great sacrifices for a cause. Some astrologers in the esoteric tradition have called it the Crusaders aspect. Well, guess what? 43 of the popes in Rome have a Mars-Neptune aspect in their chart. And it does describe, in many ways, the Catholic Church. And although all the world religions have some good things that they espouse, it has been Christianity that opened hospitals and sent missionaries and, had great charitable organizations set up to take care of the underprivileged. I mean, yeah, anybody can, point, we're human and can point to the difficulties and how the negative things have come out of this. And when the age of faith meant people sometimes put on the blinders and didn't see the obvious, and their mind checked out. But with Neptune going into Aries, we also shortly thereafter have Uranus going into Gemini. All that'll happen in 2025. And in 2026, Neptune goes into Aries to stay, doesn't retrograde back out, and Uranus goes in to Gemini to stay and doesn't back out. Well, Uranus in Gemini is, again, Gemini is the sign of information, of technology, communication, transportation, how we all get along. Well, every time Uranus has been in Gemini, and I won't spend any real time on this, but every time the United States has had a Uranus return, we've been at war. The Revolutionary War, the Civil War, World War II, and now it'll happen again. And again, there's something to be said for being empirical. Look what happened in the past. But you got to remember, this is just one note of the symphony. There's so many other things going on at the same time. And Uranus being connected to by sextile to Neptune in Aries and by trine to Pluto and Aquarius. Yes, and lots of other astrologers and other talked about this great push toward innovation and hallelujah and all the good things. And yeah, it's all there, but it's easy to get swept away by the positive. We have 2024 to go through. And it's it's not hearts and roses all the way. Trust me. And those
No,
of
I mean, even hearing what you've said so far, Bob, it intuitively, it
yeah,
feels, and you can tell me if I'm wrong with this observation, but it feels like 2024 is this dance. Now, maybe the dance is a rough dance or,
it's a
volatile, right? What's that?
maybe it's a slam dance.
There you go. There you go. Or break dance or yeah.
This isn't ballet.
So 2024 feels like there's things in motion, things changing, things moving. So is 2024, in your opinion, the setup for 2025?
Yes, and yeah, absolutely 100%. And again, we can't forget our history. We have to look at what has happened. I guess it was the philosopher Hegel that said the only thing that we learn from history is that men never learn anything from history. It's we do end up repeating our mistakes, like stepping on the rake and hitting ourselves in the forehead. But I just take a quick trip down memory lane here. Everybody here was alive, or maybe in 2028 when the subprime mortgage crisis hit,
Oh,
and
2008. Yeah.
we had this cascading effect where all of a sudden, 1.5 million people lost their homes, and that, people were over leveraged, they couldn't refinance, and well, what powered that? Pluto going uh in into Capricorn was the domino effect that set it off, which was Capricorn is hierarchical. You're my underling, you do what I tell you. I'm listening to what my overlord is telling me to do. It's like bing, 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 right down the line, and led to, in what was it, 2008, in September 15th, Lehman Brothers went bankrupt, which set off the world financial crisis. So we were in deep doo-doo for quite some time. But you have to go, but there's a reason for this. You see, you go back to 2005, 3 years before that, supply and housing had caught up to the demand. And in 2006, home prices actually started to fall for the first time in 11 years. And why did people keep on selling mortgages? There a bartender became a mortgage broker and was selling them, and then they were being bundled into these, credit swap packages and all these toxic derivative financial instruments. What powered that was greed. It's clear and simple. You may not be able to control what goes on in the larger financial market, but you can be self-examining about your own greed. Short aside on this, I sat down with my kids before this happened when I had an offer on my very large house that would have allowed me to walk away and, get another place with, $500,000 or so in the bank. And I said to the kids, look, this is a smart move financially. This is a house that you grew up in. Do you want, if we stay here, it will be tough. And they said, Dad, you do whatever you think is the right thing. But if you're asking us, we all want to stay living here. So we did. But that was like, I didn't grab the brass ring on the merry-go-round. It was one of the things that was like, okay. And I financially suffered. But my kids didn't suffer, and I didn't suffer at the personality level with them because I did what was wholesome at that level for the family. Now, I'm sharing this with you in the sense that Pluto now is leaving Capricorn and going into Aquarius. Well, Pluto is the Lord of extremes. He's the planet of life and death. When a child is born, the energy of the birth is Pluto. That is the Plutonian energy, and Pluto is the guardian at the threshold. It's like you and live or die. Well, people who don't use the outer planets think, hey, well, how I thought, Saturn is the Grim Reaper. Saturn is the one that, rules over life and death. No, Saturn is ending. Saturn is boundaries. And Saturn is and the Grim Reaper in the sense that, yes, he does bring death, but he doesn't bring birth. Pluto not only, kills, but he is the flower that comes up out of the volcanic ash. Now, when you look through history, when Pluto and Saturn are conjunct, these are rugged times. We can go back to the most recent one, which was in January of 2020. Well, duh, that was the beginning of the pandemic. But guess what? It wasn't just Saturn being there. Jupiter was there as well. And Pluto and Jupiter conjuncted, exact, just a short, in April, right after that. Excuse me. So what I'm saying is, we have this force now thrust into a new arena. And I'm saying this is like Pluto unharnessed is fine if you're a perfect master. It's fine if you're an inanimate object. But if you're in that, Joe average state of humanity like I am and the rest of us are, or trying to evolve, Pluto going into a new sign is a big FD. This is tremendous potency. Now we got a taste of that this year, and as Pluto went in and then it went back into Capricorn. I just mentioned, God, there's just so much, but Pluto on the 29th degree of Capricorn, the U.S. just completed its Pluto return, which is, 1776, Pluto was, on the 27 degrees of Capricorn. We just gone through the return. The British Empire, went through their Pluto return and got crippled. When the Roman Republic went through their Pluto return, they got crippled. It is a humbling experience. Pluto shows no mercy. And Pluto is infinite power, pure and simple. So, what does this mean with Pluto going into the Aquarius? Well,
I'm glad you asked, Bob, because I was going to ask you that very same question.
the
Because
point,
you just mentioned about Pluto going into Capricorn and what it did to the housing market and everything that happened with the financial collapse, which feels to me very Saturnian and aligns with the sign of Capricorn. But if we're doing this same kind of upheaval, but this time Pluto going to Aquarius, and
Right.
realizing what happened in 2008 and knowing something big will happen with this, but it will have a different flavor. So what do you think that flavor is going to be?
Well, it's in the arena of what it means to be a human being, what it means to be sentient, what it means to be on the planet. And I started with our marriage to technology. You remember Emerson's poem, A Simple Life? He has things are in the saddle and riding mankind. Well, that's where we are now. We have all of these things that we've become addicted to. And in the divine plan, what we're like children run amok. And what has to happen is there's got to be some corrective measure. And, it's sort of like we have to take the medicine. But the good news is the doctor who's administering the medicine is our mother and our father in the cosmic world and has our best interest at heart. So I'll have more to say about this in a minute, but I just wanted to point out that Pluto at the very last degree of uh, of Capricorn is squaring the eclipse point of the eclipse that was in 29 degrees of Aries back in April, the 20th of April, 2023. And I put this in my newsletter, but the point is that when that square hit, Mars, the god of war, was coming up to squaring Pluto and opposing that eclipse point. Well, guess what? That was down to the day that Hamas invaded Israel. And we had this immense destruction. And it's sort of like the bully in the hall punches you, but you don't push them away. You take out a howitzer and blow their brains out. So Israel invades Gaza, and all holy hell breaks loose. It's like, okay, as Gandhi said, an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. It's like Jesus saying, he without sin can cast the first stone. Well, guess what? We're all sinners. And so rather than fight it, it's like we each have to hoe our own garden, do our own internal work, so that what we present to everybody else is positive. So that's on the tail end of Pluto going into Aquarius. And yes, Pluto at 0 Aquarius is exactly where Jupiter, Saturn were conjunct back in December of 2020. Okay, this is a good symbol, and it is like you need water, and you have the fire hose connected to the fire hydrant, and the water comes flying out. It's like, yeah, well, you're not going to drink from the fire hose. It's like, give me a break. It's like you need water. You don't need to drown. It and so what I'm saying is that getting to where our humanity takes over is in is a stretch. We'll get there. We always do. The human race has survived, and it's a miracle that we've survived this far. Do you know when gunpowder was invented back in the 9th century in China, it wasn't a long stretch before that it was used for, all kinds of military things. But by the 13th and 14th century, there were people who were thinking that gunpowder was going to exterminate the human race. And, now you're walking around in a suit of armor riding a horse, and somebody's got a gun and they can shoot you. It's a whole different, it changed the dynamic. And at the end of World War II, when the atomic bomb went off, it's like we crossed another river. We've entered another, well, hey, we could exterminate the whole human race. And I was talking to my dad. My dad and I talked every day, almost up until the day he died. But he and I used to discuss politics, or, like things, human things. Both he and my mother were Christian ministers, and my dad was an Aquarius, and so very open-minded. And we would take different sides of an argument. And he was talking about, how we needed more gun control. And I started talking about, well, people should have the freedom to own a gun, no matter. And he said something to me, one phrase, and it changed my whole thought on it. And we never discussed it after that. He says, well, should everybody have the right to have their own atomic bomb? And sort of like, okay, where does your freedom infringe on mine? Where does your desire to express yourself cross the line? We need laws to live together on the planet. We need government. We need rules, and we need to all adhere to the rules. We have this year, with Pluto, infinite power, running without too many guardrails. There's some, we'll talk about that in a minute. But for the moment, what I'm saying is just like, we need to get to 2025 and 2026 before the flowers start to bloom. And, generally speaking, we haven't been good as a human race of finding the positive uses for things first. It is the impulse toward selfishness that gets in the way of us doing what we know in our higher consciousness is the right thing. When people, you think, how can people support somebody running for political office that's a pathological liar and wants to be a dictator and has broken so many laws, cheats on their income tax and all this? Well, it's because when somebody does those things, it gives you permission to not obey the laws as well. But when the whole legal structure breaks down, we have chaos. And when we have chaos, then we end up with just a mob rule, the people running and, like looting stores and, shooting each other. There has to be some kind of structure. And when people say, yeah, well, we want that for us, but not for anybody else. We live in a global world now. It has to be everybody or nobody. Do you know that there's 700, and I'm getting the number maybe wrong, 795 billionaires in the United States? And do you know what $1 billion is? If you made $1 a second, it would take you 13 days to become a millionaire. But it would take you 35 years to become a billionaire. If all of the, and people talk about, like, do we have a homeless crisis? Do you know, if every billionaire in the United States gave $23 million for the cause of eliminating homelessness, be done like that. It'd be instantly. We'd have the housing to get everybody who is unhomed into a residence. And the people and the billionaires, $23 million to them would be basically chump change. And it's like, these mega yachts, it cost more than $1.5 million to tank up a super yacht. It's like,
And these themes, and I don't mean to cut you off, but the themes you're speaking of have a lot to do with the Aquarius energy about being human, humanitarian energy. And it sounds like this Pluto going into Aquarius energy will, in some ways, be that death and rebirth, and perhaps even in ways that bring us back to our most simple ways of living or simple ways of being human. And maybe the things that we've been numbing ourselves with won't be an option, and we'll be asked to sit and ask ourselves the questions about what is important, and what am I doing not only for my life and the people around me, but what am I doing for other humans that I share the planet with?
uh, Tracy Chapman has a song called All That You Have Is Your Soul. And it really boils down to that. And when everything else is stripped away, you have that. And we will get back to that. And thank you for giving me a new direction on this here, because obviously it would be easy for me to go down the rabbit hole on any of these things. But the point that I'm making and what I'm saying is that we have the tools to solve all of the problems that face humanity. We have the ability to build a new civilization of universal brotherhood and sisterhood, where we support and help each other. Anyway, I want to talk a little bit about what we can do, each of us, during 2024, and is important. The north node of the moon, north node, south node, they always opposite each other. North node of the moon is in Aries now. Well, Aries is a sign of assertion. The south node of the moon is a sign of togetherness. It's in Libra. And the north node is Dharma. It is, exposing your essence, bringing forward this quality of the soul. Well, that means something for the people who were born with, the north node of the moon in Aries. But when it's transiting through the sign of Aries, it means something for the entire world, for everybody. And it is a time where it is our collective dharma to be self-reliant, to stand up and be courageous, and to not go along with the crowd, not do things just to please somebody else, to set boundaries, and to have the boundaries be meaningful. This isn't the meaning that we're supposed to pick a fight with everybody or anybody at all. It just means being authentic, reaching inside and bringing forth what is the real you, and being open to change. Being impulsive, sure, but impulsive doesn't mean closed-minded. It doesn't mean that, oh, I had this impulse and I'm just acting it out and that's it. But for all of us to take a step back and realize, you know what? I have to sit down with my spouse and talk to them seriously about how we're not growing and we're not happy. And are we gonna live like this? Are we gonna divorce? Are we gonna separate? Are we gonna change? Or are we gonna transform the relationship that we have? And if we're gonna transform it, how are we gonna do that? In other words, it's like, oh yeah, well, we'll get around to that, but I got something really important that I have to do. No, the relationship is important. Any relationship you have is important. And to examine it during this period. The north node of the moon went into Aries and in July of 2023, July 18th. And it will be there all through 2024 up until the 12th of January 2025. So this is extremely pertinent. It's one of the stabilizing things that you can take as an activity. Now, there's more. I wanted to end, this is one hand of the clock, so to speak. Uranus is in Taurus right now. Well, Uranus is not happy in Taurus. Taurus is the circle that holds everything in. It combines and mixes, and it puts things in their mouth, and it internalizes, it digests. Uranus is not that. Uranus, that's its fall. Uranus is its exaltation in Uranus, which is revolution. It's like, get rid of stuff. Okay, so there's a good in every transit. So what does it mean for all of us? And Uranus went into to Taurus May 18th, 2018. So you can think back to what you were doing then, and it will be there until April of 2026. So what are we talking? Again, there's some fudging because it in 2025 it dips in and dips out, but it stays basically rooted in Taurus until then. So what's the positive side? Well, when Uranus was in Taurus before, of course, ecologically, it's a disaster for the planet. And people asked me, back about 10 years ago, says, what can we do to prevent the worst of climate change? And I just laughed. I said, you are kidding. It's like, we killed it, and now you're saying, what can we do to save its life? It's dead. We've crossed the Rubicon. We've already destroyed the planet, but we can rebuild. The last time that Uranus was in Taurus, we had the Dust Bowl, where they had 100-mile high, stream of dust that went all the way from the Western Plains as far as New York City, where it got so dark that they couldn't see the sky or each other anymore. It's like, okay, we have done this to Mother Nature again, and we did it with technology. Uranus rules technology, but at the human level, when Uranus was in Taurus, we started Social Security. We started all of the civil service projects. We had all of these programs to elevate humanity, and at the same time we trashed the earth. So during this time, we can have regard for the planet. We can swim against the stream. Bill Gates did an amazing job about the necessity for political action in a video that he did called "We Can't Recycle Our Way Out of Climate Change," which is to say, he is externalizing it, saying, it's like, okay, you can recycle all you want, but we're still going to have, junk in the ocean. We're still going to have, terrible things happening to the plants, and to the animals and to the human kingdom. But the point is that we can go through these internal changes where we can say, I'm not going to contribute to to the difficulties of the planet, to the best of my um, uh, knowledge, I think that this is bad. All of my kids became vegetarians and at young age, and I didn't encourage them or discourage them for it. I didn't cook meat at home, but I didn't prevent them if we were in a restaurant from ordering something else if they wanted that. But all of them said to me something that stuck in my mind, and they've all conveniently forgotten it, although they're vegetarians. Said, I want to be a vegetarian because I think the idea of raising animals for food is gross. Well, yeah. Good friend of mine who was working in a veterinary clinic went home and was having a piece of steak, and suddenly the smell reminded her, like, this is just like the dog that I've been washing at the vet clinic all day. It's like, um, it's a change of heart that we are going to go through this. And yes, during this time, financial markets during this transit will change. Taurus is money. But it's important to remember what money is about. Money only has value because we place value on it. It is if you have $1 billion and you're sitting on an island by yourself, the $1 billion doesn't do you any good at all. It only has meaning because other people agree that it has meaning. Now, you can't eat the money, as the saying goes. So the point that I'm making is that Uranus can serve this goal for each of us individually. Is helping us wake up to what our material values are worth. How much do you need? I was with a friend who's, this passed on, but we were with this guy who we were having breakfast, and he's extremely well off, one of the 1%ers. And he says, "Oh, I've got to hurry. I've got to, the stock market's opening. I got to get on my computer." And my friend, Susan Freeman, who I dearly miss now, said, "Haven't you made enough money?" And it was just like, oh, I'm going to walk away from my friends to go sit and stare at a computer screen so I can add more digits to my bank account. And it's like, why would I not cherish the moment with my friends? And it was like a sort of an epiphany for him. But Susan was telling him something important. And so my spiritual master has said to us, make enough money that you can take care of all of your responsibilities, but don't spend your time on it beyond that. Doesn't matter. And Taurus is the symbol of value, material value. Jupiter is the symbol of, and Sagittarius is a symbol of universal, higher values. And when the two of them mate or match up, as they have this year with Jupiter in Taurus, it is an opportunity to see what good can we do with the material goods that we have. That is the meaning of this Jupiter transit through Taurus that's going on now, which we'll talk about a little bit. But Jupiter is going into Gemini in 2024, a little bit later in 2024. And that will be an end of this, what we call reevaluative period of putting in the energy into finding good uses for the material world. Mm-hmm. Not that that's not a worthwhile project, it is. But we have other fish to fry, and we'll get on with that. Now, I think I picked out 4 things that are givens that are stay nights through 2024. Another one is Saturn in Pisces. Well, Saturn is in Pisces from the 3rd of March, that's through the 7th of March, 2023, to the 24th of May, 2025. Now, Saturn stays in a sign for about 2.5 years. Well, Saturn in Pisces is like the police coming in and trying to, herd the psychic cattle that are running amok. Pisces is everybody, everything is everything. It's like Pisces breaks down all the barriers, and Saturn is the desire to put the barriers in place. Well, Neptune rules Pisces. Neptune, Saturn, it could be another whole conversation, is a theme of the formation of the Soviet Union, the diminishing of the Soviet Union, and now finally the ending of Russia. But Saturn in Pisces is, for us individually, what we learn from that is just that there's a fear in each of us at this time of isolation, of being cut off. Saturn pulling in and putting in boundaries around the psychic faculties, which is not comfortable. How do you regulate spirituality? How do you regulate the things that take us beyond the limitations of the finite, the limits of time? Well, hey, I think this is very interesting. Saturn was in Pisces back at the time of Pluto and Uranus conjuncting in 1964, 65, 66. Well, Saturn was opposing. They were conjunct in Virgo, which is when the semiconductor was invented. They got they got these microscopic transistors on a wafer, and the first personal computers were preparing to come online. But also was when LSD was brought forward, and and the psychedelics were coming out, and Saturn is there trying to corral all of this, trying to get its arms around it. Well, now that Saturn, and again, there was another cycle, that was 60 years ago, but now, and there was a, midterm cycle in the 90s, but, and now when Saturn, for us, is in Pisces, of course, we'll see, universal regulations over, LSD and psilocybin and cannabis, and, you see that being used in, not just for recreational purposes, but for, helping people with, the mental health crises and such. And again, regulations, boundaries, here's how this can be safely applied and used. So we'll see all of that. And for us, I struggled with this, but the lesson for each of us as Saturn is going through Pisces now is to surrender, to the will of the cosmos, surrender to the divine, surrender to God, to accept that the divine plan is in place and it is for everyone's good. And our job is just to pick up our part and to do that and to be at peace with it. And because we have boundaries, doesn't mean that you can't pick up the phone and call somebody. It doesn't mean you can't knock on the door of your neighbor and say, hi, I've just moved into the neighborhood, or, we've lived next to each other for 20 years, but we've never really talked to each other. In other words, it is a time that we are empowered to break the bonds of isolation and to allow the fluidity to happen and to be able to recognize the value of every human being. Because, the secret, every person is a whole universe. And that magic exists in them just like it does in you. And so to honor that is to be able to be open and available to listen. Saturn rules hearing, and to be able to listen to other people is a wonderful thing. It's cleansing because Mercury, which is sound, rules the fifth chakra, which is the throat. And there is a cleansing that happens just through the process of listening to others, that you help the vibration come forward to raise it. So Saturn in Pisces is not a dumb note that just happens to be in there. It's an important part of this lesson that we're going through. Again, Saturn is the Lord of karma, and figuring out what our karmic obligations are during this time. It's a very big deal. And I'm going to just mention one other thing that's a stabilizer through 2024. It's Neptune in Pisces. Neptune in Pisces is a desire to connect. It's a desire to transcend. Neptune is the planet of culture. It's the planet of civilization. And you can, like, again, it's a long march, but Neptune, whatever sign it's in, on the 12 signs of the zodiac, that is the definition of what culture is about at the time. And Neptune in Pisces now is to lift our vision, to inspire, to see something beyond the limitations of the physical world. And at the same time that we have Saturn in Pisces, it is the ability to make our dreams come true, to harness the insight and the imagination of Neptune with the materializing, concretizing aspect of Saturn. Now, the two actually do not come into conjunction. They come very close to conjunct in Pisces in 2025, 26. But it isn't until until they actually conjunct in 2026 at 0 degrees Aries, which will be the end of the beginning. The beginning of this transformation is taking place in human consciousness now. Again, all of these are gigantic, big structures. And I'm going to talk about what I think of as the important aspects that are happening in 2024. And again, I'm just picking the things that I think are the most useful or the most significant. Mercury is retrograde 3 times every year. And Mercury will be retrograde, periodically 3 times in 2024, just like Mr. Mercury is retrograde right now as we're speaking. But the 3 times in 2024 will be all in fire signs. And fire is enthusiasm. And when Mercury is retrograde in the sign of fire, it represents the highs and the lows. You can think of it as like everybody's manic depressive. They go from like extreme up into extreme down. It's because the the personal, external, enthusiastic emotions are pushing the envelope. And Mercury going backwards, looking and saying, hey, what's not good here? What needs to be corrected? What do we need to edit? What needs changing? Well, all through 2024, Uranus is in sextile to both Neptune and Pluto. And it is one of our saving graces. Remember, Pluto, infinite power. Neptune, infinite bliss. Uranus, infinite knowledge, infinite intelligence. So these are the three divine attributes, and they're in harmony with each other. But only Pluto has crossed into the transforming sign, and so we have this, but they're still there in supportive focus, and it is up to each of us to not drink the Kool-Aid or jump off the cliff and go off the deep end with it, but to keep our feet clearly focused on what is tangible. That doesn't mean that we don't dream. It doesn't mean that we belittle the higher imaging. It just means that we have to stay focused in the material world that we live in until we reach the promised land, which is that Martin Luther King said in his speech just the night before he was assassinated. He says, I've been to the mountain, I've seen the promised land. I might not get there, but I've seen it. And we as a people will get there. 2024 is the visioning time. We are seeing where we're going. But I can show you pictures of Chicago and tell you where I used to live there. But it's different than actually going and visiting. Doesn't mean that you shouldn't look at the road maps, look at the pictures, because it all sets some intention. And this is a stellar year for getting on with it. So on March 2025, we have the first eclipse of the year. And
March of 2024.
24. Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Excuse me, God help me. Where would I be without you helping me with this, Dallisa? Oh, God. Anyway, I think I'll get some sleep tonight after this is over.
I know, it's late your time.
Anyway, the point is March 25th, 2024, we have the eclipse at 5 degrees of Aries, Libra. Sun in Aries, Moon in Libra. Well, this is with Venus, the planet that rules Libra, and Saturn, the planet that's in its exaltation in Libra, are conjunct at the time of the eclipse. And this will be, a time when we will be forced to, what we say, use it or lose it. Relationships are the big question mark here. And we don't have to act out of our extremes, but we do have to act. And as Upasani Maharaj said, perfect master in India said, to say your prayers at the time of an eclipse is more potent spiritually than if you had walked around the world 4 times chanting God's name sincerely. So I always say prayers at the time of the full moon and new moon anyway, but the time of the eclipse is so powerful. It allows you to set your rhythm to the rhythm of the planet and to nature. It's very powerful. Well, on the 1st of April, Mercury turns retrograde, and that would, from the 1st to the 25th of April, will be a time of this reevaluation, and I've just poked the bear, saying, check your own moods. If you're feeling, like ecstatic about something, or you're feeling totally down in the dumps, do your best to stand back and get some objective appraisal. The important thing is to utilize Pluto for what it's good for during this time. What is Pluto good? Pluto in Aquarius. Well, one of the higher meanings of Pluto in Aquarius is to be detached, to be able to stand back and get distance, even from yourself. Not just your body, your ego, your mind, your emotions, but your whole composite picture of who you are and what you're about. You stand back and look and say, hey, I don't have to take these emotions so seriously. Well, Mercury will be retrograde in Aries. And so looking and seeing, how do we initiate? How do we go about, uh, getting the tasks done in our everyday life? Do we go into the kitchen and just start, oh, this goes there and this goes there? Or do we have some plan? Do we figure out how we want to approach a task before we put it into motion? As Stephen Covey says in his 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, begin with the end in mind. And then first things first. You said Aries is, let's do the first thing, but start with remembering where you're going. Okay, so we have another solar eclipse on April 8th, and that is on the 19th degree of Aries. This eclipse has its meaning, has its potency, and will be with us as an active ingredient for a few years. What I'm mentioning here now is that we want this eclipse happens with Mercury retrograde, so it is important to reevaluate, what is it that we really want? What is it that we really are desiring of doing? This is going to be, not to say a difficult eclipse, but a little bit harder to get our hands around. And I'm focusing on Mercury, being able to, set your mind in the right place, because Mars, the planet that rules Aries, is in Pisces at the time. And what else is going on? We got Neptune and Saturn, in Pisces. It's like we're the Pisces generation until Pisces is history for Neptune, and that's a ways away. So, this is a recurring pattern. The old expression, be careful what you wish for. Well, nothing could be truer than that. And, this eclipse comes on the 8th of April, but right after that. So it shows up as an important feature in this chart. But right after that, Jupiter, which is in Taurus, comes to the conjunction of Uranus. Well, Jupiter is luck, Uranus is spontaneous, it's in Taurus. The financial markets are likely to go nuts during this time. And you, having some astrological knowledge and looking at this, there's a lot of other factors, and I'm not giving advice on investments, but I'm saying people are apt to say, well, I'm going to jump in and get, capitalize on that and then get out on the others. It's like, Jupiter's asking something else. Yes, you can do that. But if you're getting ready to get into the boat on the side of the Titanic as it's sinking, and somebody says, "I'll give you $1 million for your seat on the boat." You think, wow, $1 million. All I have to do is to give up my life. So you take the $1 million and the other person gets into your seat on the boat, and they're in the lifeboat and you're on the sinking ship. And I'm saying going after material wealth at this time is like selling your seat on the lifeboat. Now, there are no failures. And it is true that there will be lots of money between the 20th of March and the 20th of May. And there'll be a lot of money switching hands. And it is possible to get involved in the markets and to make money. There was a book called the Psychology of Money, and somebody collected all the things, all of the psychiatrists and psychologists had said on the issue of money. And one of them said, the reason that most people don't have money is they know that it's not worth what it takes to get it. And that's what I'm saying to you, is to say, where does your time go? Where are you going to be spending your time during this time period? Now, on the 6th of May, Saturn comes to the semi-square of Pluto. And, a few days in and around that will be a time where we're testing the viability of something that was put into motion when Saturn and Pluto were conjunct back in 2020. That was when the pandemic was taking off. And we're looking at now, for each of us, looking at what do we put in place? What did we do at that time? And does it have tensile strength? Will it carry us where we need to go? Forget the things that are going on in the world. It's not about that. It's about what each of us individually are doing. And then on the 25th of May, Jupiter enters Gemini. Wow, this is big, because Gemini rules how we communicate and travel. Now, Jupiter was happy in Taurus. Jupiter's not so happy in Gemini. Why? Because Jupiter is in detriment in Gemini. Jupiter's the big picture, and Gemini is the collecting baseball card side of our mental life. It's facts, it's figures, it's diagrams, it's planning, but it's not the large scale planning that Jupiter likes. So what we will see on the positive side is the opening up of new channels, new growth in media. From that point on, we'll be looking at new ways of communicating. And later in the year, Jupiter will be an aspect to both into Pluto and to Saturn, and we'll be tearing down building. We'll see litigation having to do with how newspapers and video channels and the internet, all of the things, all of the mechanisms for how people communicate will be under fire. And we'll see we'll see whole industries collapse. There's a big revolution next year in the film industry and how images are created. Spiritually, film is very important. It is a very powerful medium. It goes beyond the scope of this talk to get into the weeds with it. But I just wanted to say that when Jupiter squares Neptune next year, and it's involved in T-square, it's in mutable signs, and our thinking will change as to how we look at what we want to convey to other people. You know, there was Bill Ellison, who was a head of high-tech company, was asked at a forum back about 20 years ago, well, what can we do to protect privacy? He says, get over it. You don't have any anymore. And it's true. Anybody can find out about anybody's anything. But what we do have to do is to get over the whole idea of fearing that, of fearing each other, and worrying about what other people. There's a saying in the 12-step program, what you think about me is none of my business. And it's true. We have to move beyond being concerned with image or what anybody else cares about what goes on in our life. So Jupiter and Gemini will be there for a year, and will be a time of tremendous reorientation in the whole arena. There will be some important discoveries of ways that we can travel that will be safer and better. And we will actually use technology to our benefit. You know, we can, if we started listing out problems, there's all kinds of them, but you know, the big problems are is that we don't have spiritual freedom. We're not our real self. And in the selfish, you know, egocentric life that we live day to day, we do damage to our culture and to each other. We'll be poking the bear this next year and breaking down some of those barriers. Saturn goes retrograde on the 29th of June. I could have talked about the retrograde of all the planets, and there's a different meaning to each one of them. When Jupiter's retrograde, like it is now, it's difficult for, you know, you don't want to start an enterprise that's commercially based, you know, that reaches out and touches people that way, because it doesn't go well. But when Saturn is retrograde, it's like Saturn intensifies when it's retrograde. It's like more Saturn. And we will see between June 29th and November 15th, there'll be periodic gigantic suffering in the financial markets. And Saturn, as you know, is in Pisces, so this will affect everybody sort of across the board. Now, we do have Mercury turning retrograde August 4th to the 28th, and that again is in it's in Virgo, but it goes back into Leo before it turns direct. So the first part of it is, yeah, we'll be, you know, looking, it's like, oh God, I didn't get the word spelled correctly, and yes, I said the wrong thing, and I put my socks in the wrong drawer. You know, oh God, I got my travel reservations wrong, and I've got to rectify it. All that's going on. But when Mercury in its retrograde motion goes back into Leo, we'll be in this highs and lows emotional extreme period, and that will happen starting on about the 15th of August and going right on up until Mercury turns direct on the 28th of August. So this is, I'm I know I've taken a little bit too long with some of this, but bear with me. I'm just going to give you a few other things here. I know my pictures become cloudy. It's my cross to bear. I'm having a little problem with my video. Anyhow,
It's all right. They can still hear you, but yeah, if you want to go through the final aspects of the year, and then we can start to close it out.
yes, I'm going to do that right
Okay.
now. Excuse me. What I've been saying is that we have Jupiter sesquiquadrate Pluto and Aquarius on the 27th of August. And that will be about a week period of time on each side of it, where we will have an opportunity to make some kind of large-scale change. And we will see this in society. This will be a time of things changing in the media dramatically across the board. And then both on August 19th and then again on December 4th, Jupiter-Saturn square, which is going to test the viability of the ideals that were put forward at the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. This is a big challenge to the spirit of brotherhood and sisterhood, because Jupiter is in Gemini and Saturn is in Pisces, mutable signs, the ability to take a spiritual leap forward, but it will not be painless. Let me just put it that way. September 17th is the lunar eclipse, Virgo Pisces, 25th degrees of Virgo Pisces. It's a mutable T-square, which requires for us to be sane, is to reevaluate what's going on in our own mental life. We will see a gigantic shift in media at that time. And the film industry will follow on the heels of it just about a month later. In September 25th, we have the semi-square again between Saturn and Pluto, the review of what we did back at January of 2020, seeing what things we put into place. Were we overly fear-ridden when the pandemic broke out? Did we develop some negative habits then that we have to rectify? And then the final eclipse of the year is on October 2nd. And this is a solar eclipse at 10 degrees of Libra. And anything that we have not dealt with relationships. And again, this is not just marriage or romantic relationships. It can be business partnerships or even casual friendships. But the way that we connect with others, what is toxic and has not been dealt with will come to the surface. And again, eclipses are long-range things. They last for years at a time. But this particular one, you will see within 10 days before and 10 days after, stuff will come up. It's an unusual occurrence. And that will bring us right to the tail end of the year. And I will just mention that we have Pluto and Aquarius from January 20th until September 1st next year. So it gives us a long time to sort of reevaluate the stuff that's gone on in our life over the last few years. And if you can keep in mind, the two keynotes here are detachment, to be able to stand back and look at things, and surrender. which is Saturn in Pisces. Be able to say, okay, God can snow faster than I can shovel. Let me see what the plan is here before I set to work on what I want to do. So on November 19th in 2024, Neptune, Pluto goes into Aquarius and will be there until 2043. So it will be there, without interruption. So those are the key things. Mercury's last retrograde period is the 25th of November, the 15th of December. I've said it'll be the same thing of just watching your highs and lows. Mercury will be in Sagittarius at the time. Don't bite off more than you can chew. Check your facts. All of that is important. And then on the 13th of December, Gemini, Jupiter makes a sesquiquadrate to Aquarius, Pluto. And it'll be, again, we'll see in the external world, a couple of days on each side of it, a gigantic jump forward in terms of this whole pattern of, again, this isn't in your life. It'll be, do you have the courage when somebody's come up with a new something or other, a way that you can communicate with other people? Do you have the courage to jump on board it? A new technology is emerging, and to be able to separate the BS from the good stuff is really important. But there, as I say, all that glitters isn't gold, but hey, guess what? Gold does glitter. So, being able to separate the BS from the good stuff, to be able to jump in at this time, will allow you to end 2024 on very positive footing. Again, I apologize for going on a little longer than I had anticipated, but if you have any questions or there's any thoughts, and you're listening to this and we're not doing this live, you're welcome to write me or email me. And I'm actually pretty good at responding to all my emails, and I get a lot of them. So what do you think, Dallisa?
Yeah, you packed a lot in there. I'm sure that folks are going to want to rewatch it again, bookmark the video, share it with friends and family. Hopefully they had pen and paper the first time they watched this. If not, they're going to want to rewatch it and get all of the notes written down. But also your email newsletter is really fantastic, and it has so much information in it. So in the description of the video, if you look below, I've included Bob's information and email address. And so if you want to get Bob's newsletter, that's where you can access that information and sign up for that. And yeah, I mean, there's so much here. I wrote down so many notes as I was taking it all in and listening. And I'm going to be rewatching this again myself to make sure I got all the notes right, because you've given me, and I'm sure everybody listening, a lot of things to consider for 2024. So in our closing, Bob, is there anything else you want to mention before we say goodbye to everybody that's tuned in?
Hey, it's all about love. As it says in the Bible, what gaineth a man if he owns the whole world but loses his soul? It's all about remembering what's really important.
Yeah.
This is the year of separating the wheat from the chaff. We live in a time, and we will see it play out next year to the max. We live in an extremely polarized world. We have people who think, have the philosophy that, hey, I got mine. You could get yours if you just worked hard enough. And if you didn't work hard enough, so what? You didn't get it. That's Jupiter. That is the Jupiter experience of like, hey, all you got to do is do it. And then there's this to Saturn. Well, not everybody is Michael Jordan. They grew up in a ghetto, but that they're not going to become a basketball player. They don't have the talent, the vision, the karma, whatever, but we have to take care of everybody. We have to have some kind of safety net in place. So there's these two, and that's Saturn. That's like we have to have laws in place. And guess what? What planet rules the Republican Party and what planet rules the Democratic Party? Saturn rules the Democrats. Jupiter rules the Republicans. Now, you don't always see that philosophy come forward in those two parties. And it's not about the parties. It's about two philosophies. But a bird can fly because it has two wings that work together. Jupiter and Saturn are the two wings that have to work together in order for us to get anywhere at all. And to diminish the idea of togetherness, selflessness. We live in a society of pigs, but to live in a society where only the poorest element of society materially is the benchmark for what we can all do. That's demeaning. It's like as soon as we outgrow the idea of thinking that the material world has value in and of itself, the sooner we get to the golden years. The truth of the matter is the material world is here to support the growth of consciousness. When we use it for that end, we're riding the chariot. We're on the way to success. Anyway, I will meet you all on the higher planes of consciousness. Dallisa,
Absolutely.
thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. You packed in a lot of information in this video. And like I said a minute ago, everybody listening, if you could just do us a favor, give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, but also share it with a few people. Bob just gave you a lot of his years of wisdom and insight in this video. And I would love if you could share it with a few people and encourage them to tune in and ask these bigger questions about their life, about what they want to see in humanity and where we're headed and what they can do to contribute to the betterment of the planet. So yeah, we'll include all of Bob's information below in the description, so make sure you check that out. And again, thank you everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on this channel with a new video. Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.